Welcome back everyone. In this section we will register the new user. It's a little bit complex, but don't worry, I will try to make it as simple as possible. So let's get started. We covered user login and logout in the last section. Before starting today's tutorial, let's first take a look at the admin panel. Let me tell you, if someone wants to manage user registration from the admin panel, then you can easily manage your users from here. Because you see that it is possible to register users from this panel as well. Since we completed the login authentication in the last tutorial, we can secure the restricted pages of the web page with that authentication. However, in this tutorial, we will also register users from the website. So let's go back to the code editor and first add a new URL for our registration page to the urls.py file. I'm just copying the previous URL for convenience. Paste this in the next line and change the name and path name to register. In the view class, we need to write a function for registration, so write the name of that function here. We will go to the view file and create a function with the same name. Write name equals register here. So now let's go to our view class and create a function for registration. For the convenience of a task, let's copy this return render statement and paste it here. Now let's type register.html here. Now let's copy this register.html text. Because we need to create an HTML file with the exact same name in the template folder. So, as I said, let's create a file called register.html inside the template folder. Now let's copy the extends tag and block content tag from the home page and bring it to our register page. And don't forget to close the block with the end block tag. This is actually a common mistake of mine. I don't know if it happens to you. Now write register inside the h1 tag and just check if the page is working or not. Now we need to add a menu item, so let's go to the navbar page and see where we can add our new menu item. Here you see we implemented some logic for the menu item in the last tutorial. The logic is that if the user is already logged in, then the logout will be shown, and if not, then the login link will be shown. So in this case, since we should not show the register link for the users who are already logged in, so we should keep this register link inside the else statement. So let's copy this login HTML block and then paste it here. Now change the login text to register. Now let's write register inside this URL tag. We have already defined this register URL in our urls.py file. Hopefully we all remember it. So now let's check whether the work we've done so far is working properly or not. Let's log out of the admin panel and go to our website to see if we have a register link and its page. Look here, since I didn't log out, only the logout link is showing. But when I log out, now look, both register and login are showing. Great. Our initial work is complete. Now let's develop the registration form. So let's go back to the code editor. Inside our web app folder, create a file called forms.py where we will develop our registration form. We first need to import the user creation form library. So to do that, type from Django contribution auth forms, then import user creation form. Then we need to import the user model. So type from Django contribution auth models import user. Now let's define a class called registration form and pass the user creation form as a parameter. Now let's define the fields we want to put in the form. We need the email field in this form. Then add the first name, and be sure to define the field type for each field. Now we will define the last name in the same way. Oops, I forgot to import Django forms. Let's import the Django forms package library. To do that, type from Django then import forms. Now let's add some field properties for these fields. Give the email field a label, but we'll leave it blank because we'll be using a placeholder to label this field. Now add the widget property and where we will define some attributes for this field. Here we are using the same property and widget attribute for both the first name and last name fields. I forgot to add another attribute to the widget, which is the class attribute. This is required because we are using Bootstrap. So copy this form control class attribute and paste it in both the first name and last name fields. Now let's create a class called meta. You can say this is a rule in the Django framework where we will define which fields from a model class we want to show in our form. So write model equals user. Then define which fields you want to put in our form. If you had written fields equals underscore underscore all here, all the fields of the user model would have been included, but for our simplicity, we will define the fields. If you notice here, you will see that I am using two fields password1 and password2. This is actually when the user enters the first password during registration, and then when they enter the second password, it will be checked whether it matches the first password. This is actually a common practice. I will copy and paste some code from my GitHub repository at this stage. This is actually a very simple code. You can also say that it is just a rule for the Django framework. All of this is actually similar to the fields that we defined inside the registration form class. I will share my Git repository link in the description box, so that you can use this code. If you look closely, you will see that the attribute properties here are almost the same. The username, password1 and password2 fields are similar to the definition of the email, fast name and last name fields, and their attributes are similar. Now let's do some work in the view file, where we will save our registration data and implement some logic. If we look at the login form implementation logic, here we have used the post method. So we will use the same post method to save the registration data. Now we will declare an object called form under this if statement and call our registration form class instance here where the request parameter will be post, because we will save the registration data in the database. I will explain the post, get, put methods in detail later. Note that I have already imported the registration class at the top of this view file. Oh, I made a small typing mistake. It should be form, not from. Okay. Since I have declared an object of the registration form class, its name should be form. First we will validate the form and then save the data. So we used an if statement because if the form is not validated we should show some alert. Now our goal is to automatically authenticate and log in the user after the user registration is successful. If you want, you can add some other logic here. For example, after the registration is complete, you can send an OTP to the user via email or mobile as 2FA authentication. But for simplicity's sake, I will describe this complex part later. Now declare a variable called username which will basically get the username value from our registration form. And similarly we will do the same for the password. Notice here I am getting password1. You probably remember that we originally used password2 to check if it is the same as password1. But we will get password1 here to save it. Now we are declaring an object named user and passing in two values, username and password, for authentication. I believe you already understand where the username and password values come from and how they are assigned. You must remember that we imported the Django login class at the top of this view file. Now we will use that to log in this new user, where we pass the user object as a request parameter. And now we should show a message to the newly registered user. Right? So let's give a message. In this case the message could be something like this: you are successfully registered and welcome to our site. Then redirect the user to the home page. So far we have worked with if statements, now we need else statements too, right? So what should be our first task? How should we handle our registration form if we want to register a user without providing any data in the form? So let's first declare an object called form for the registration form which will not have any request parameters. Now in the return render statement, declare an attribute called form. Here the attribute form actually refers to our form object. Now let's do some work on my register.html page. You see here I have taken the form tag and defined it as post method and left the action property blank. And to secure the form I have used CSRF token tag. I have already discussed the CSRF token tag in the last tutorial. Now we are using an if state for error handling in this form. Close the if statement, I might forget about it again. Inside this if statement, we use a div tag so that if an error is thrown, it is shown inside this div. Now we will take a for loop statement and where we will check the fields of our registration form for errors. Now we will take an if statement so that if we get an error in any field, we will be able to address that error. Now use the Django tag here to show the label tag of the field and the field error inside it. Now close the if statement. Don't forget to close the for loop statement. Notice on line 25 that I have put the form dot as underscore p inside the Django tag. This is a powerful and flexible technique in Django to render forms. In short, we created our registration form in the form.py file, which will be rendered in HTML format here. And on line 28, we have added a submit button that Django can automatically understand and will send a request to the view.py file to submit the data from the form. Okay, we finished our work, now it's time to check. Wow, our registration form is showing. Great. Actually, developing forms in the Django framework is quite easy. Now let's fill out the form and see if our logic implementation is working properly or not. Look at the alert showing above. Since we have used Django's user package library, this alert is showing. Let's make the password a little more complex and enter it. Wow! Great! We were able to register successfully. And notice here, as soon as the registration is completed, our implemented message is shown and at the same time it logs us into the system as our logic implementation did. Now let's go back to the admin panel and see if our new user has actually registered or not. I will log into the admin panel with the admin user because the users created from the registration form will not be able to access the admin panel because I am not registering them as staff. Yes, our new user is showing in the user list here. Notice here that our newly registered user's staff status is showing a red cross icon as I described to you a while ago. Now let's log out of the admin panel and check if we can log into our website with the newly registered user. Enter the newly created username and password and then hit the submit button to log in. Great! We were able to log in and we are seeing the success message. Now let's log out of the account and try to log into the admin panel with the same user. You will see that the login will not work. You see, you can't log into the admin panel because this user is not registered as a staff member. Now log in with the admin user. You see, now you are logged in. So, we have completed everything from project setup to user login authentication and user registration. We will go deeper in our next tutorial, where we will work on operational activities. I hope you are enjoying this tutorial series. Let me remind you again, if you want to get tutorial series on machine learning, AI, deep learning, and data science and data engineering, then subscribe to the channel. I hope to see you in the next tutorial.